All right, if you look at page 7 and 8 of your notes, I believe is where you're at. We're on lesson number 3. Lesson number 1 was our foundational lesson. Lesson number 2, I call it the 4 commands. And if you take everything the Bible says about marriage and the husband and wife and boil it down to its essence, there are 4 commands for the husband and there are 4 commands for the wife. These are things we do whether we feel like it or not. And both of those are available online to catch up with where we're at. And so we're now on lesson number 3. And lesson number 3 is a little bit different than the others that we've been going through. And the title of this lesson, I call it Finding Strength in Our Differences. Finding Strength in Our Differences. As you probably have realized, most couples are very different. Husbands and wives. Different not only in the obvious ways, but different in many other ways as well. And those differences are what creates most of our conflict. Now, those differences are also the reason why you fell in love to begin with. Somebody once said that what's great to date is not always great to mate. The very things that you fall in love with in your dating process are the very things that you get frustrated with and have the most fights over in your mating process. And so how do we deal with those differences? So in this lesson, we're going to talk about how to find strength in our differences based upon our character, first of all, or personality. Secondly, our creation as male and female, how we're different as men and women. And then thirdly, by our choices. Choices that were made for us as well as choices that we made in life. All 3 of these make us a very unique person, and we've got to learn how to get along with that unique person as well. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about, in this lesson, 2 kinds of truth. Now, the first truth is what we call biblical truth. And biblical truth is always absolute. If God said it, it's true because God is true. And so everything we read in the Bible, everything we find in the Bible is absolute truth, and we can trust it and build upon that truth as well. But we're also in this lesson going to use what's called observational truth. Now, observational truth is not necessarily taught in the Bible, but there are occasions where the Bible talks about things that we can observe, but it is evidenced in the Bible. For example, we're going to talk about personalities. And nowhere in the Bible does it really talk about different kinds of personalities, but we can clearly see different personalities. For example, among the apostles, Peter's personality was very, very different than Thomas. Thomas was the doubter. Thomas was kind of the one that kind of stood back and observed things, where Peter was the kind of guy that just never stopped for a second in his life, and he would rush in where others were afraid to go. And so you can see very different personalities between them. And we're going to talk about our different personalities. You can also see in the Bible very clearly that men and women are created differently. The Bible tells us that God created a male and female. And we're going to talk about some things that the Bible talks about, and we're going to talk about other things that we can observe just by observing men and women and by scientific study as well. Now, observational truth is only as good as our observation. Okay? Observational truth is only as good as our observation. For example, for a long time, people said, well, the world is flat because all they could observe was a flat world. They could just see the flatness of the earth, and so their observational truth was the world must be flat. Now, as we were able to move out into space and up in height, and as ships were able to transit around the world, we began to learn that the world was round. Now, long before scientists said that the world is round, the Bible said that. In Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 22, it says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are grasshoppers, that stretches out the heavens as a curtain and spreads them out as a tent to dwell in." So the Bible talked about the circle of the earth when men were talking about the world being flat, and for a long time afterwards as well. And so that's a biblical truth, but observational truth is limited by our observation. So the more you can observe, for example, when I want to come up with observational truth, the better my perspective. If I get up into space, I can look down and see that the world is round. Our perspective is important. The numbers that I observe, if I look at one man, I can't really say, well, this is what all men are like. But if I look at 100 men or 1,000 men or 10,000 or 100,000 men, the broader my observation, the more my truth is going to be dependable. And so observational truth is only as good as our observation. Secondly, observational truth requires greater data, both broad and specific. So we need broad data and we need specific data in observational truth. Now, you can be wrong. Many people have observed things, then later on we find out that they were wrong in their observation. And usually that's either based upon a lack of data and a lack of scope, or it's based upon bias. Many times we will observe things, and according to our bias is how we will come to our conclusion as well. And so I will freely admit to you that everybody has a bias in observational truth. The unsaved person has a bias. The saved person has a bias. Somebody that's looking for something to be true, his bias is probably going to affect in how he observes the world around him. And so our bias comes into play. And new observation and new data can also change our conclusion. Even in the course, I've taught this a series on marriage before. This is a new and different one, and I've tried to upgrade it and improve it as I've gone along. But I've looked over some of my past notes, and I've realized, new studies have come out and more conclusions. And so I've made a few changes, nothing major. But as we broaden our observation, as we increase our data, that is going to affect our observational truth. Now, the third thing about observational truth is not always absolute or universal truth. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you can't say with observational truth that it's true of everyone. I can say there's something true about men in general, but there's exceptions in this room. I can say there's truth about women in general, but there's exceptions in this room. We can talk about this personality, but not everybody that has that personality is going to have all of the same characteristics, and vice versa. And so you cannot say that about all. There's always exceptions or variances to the rule. We're going to talk about 4 basic personalities, and everybody in this room is going to fit into one of those 4, and probably a combination of 2 of them, one dominant, one secondary. But yet we can take 2 or 5 or 10 of the people with the same personalities, and there's going to be variances in that. They're going to have different strengths and levels and aspects of that. Personality, sex, upbringing, all of these variables must be considered. So, for example, we can say, here's somebody that's a man. This is generally true of a man, but if he's this personality, then that may not be true, because the personality combines with the fact that he's male and changes that observational truth. And so you need to take all of these into account. So conclusions can be based upon wrong, incomplete, or missing data. And I'm freely willing to admit that. A lot of scientists won't tell you that. A lot of sociologists and psychologists especially won't tell you that, because of their bias. They say, well, this is absolute because we've observed it. But nobody can say that about observational truth. We can say that about biblical truth, but with observational truth, we always have to realize that our data can be wrong. Our biases can affect our understanding of that truth. We may not have complete information. And so we've got to understand that. It doesn't mean we can't build and trust that truth, but we just have to be careful with it as well. Now, also, what is true in one place may not be true of another. Like, I can say there's certain things that are true of women in America that are not true of women in the Philippines, because it's a very different culture. And so it's not always absolute to every place. There are things that are true about people that live in Hawaii that are not going to be true about people living in the U.S. mainland. And so we have to take that into account as well. Now, observational truth is guided by or prejudice upon our foundational truth. So in other words, the foundational truth, what we believe, is going to affect what we observe. For example, if you're in the military, you observe things differently than those who have never been in the military. Especially if you've been in a place like Afghanistan or Iraq. Even here, when you get back here, you look at trash in the road differently than anybody else does because it could be an IED. Now, it's not going to be necessarily one here, but you're so, it's so ingrained in you to look at that way, you can't not look at it here. For somebody in the military, again, especially been in Iraq or Afghanistan, when July 4th comes and a firecracker goes up, as a civilian, I might jump a little bit, but somebody in the military is going to have a very different effect on them. And so our observation of what we see is always going to be affected by our foundational truths. And I want to make that clear as we go into this. Now, as a Christian, I observe life differently than the unsaved. So I'm going to look at the same studies, and I may come to a different truth than the unsaved person does. I may come to a different truth than the sociologist or the psychologist does. And so our foundational truth is going to affect our understanding of observational truth. And so let's just be honest with that and look at it from that perspective. Now, because I know the Bible is absolute truth, my foundation comes from that, and so I believe that we have a better looking upon observational truth. It's like with creation versus evolution. A non-saved scientist looks at the facts and says, well, obviously evolution is true. A creationist, somebody who believes in God, looks at the facts and says, obviously creation is true. Now, who's right? Well, I believe we're right because we're based upon, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. I think we have absolute truth to build our observational truth on, but the scientists say, no, you don't. In the beginning, there was a big bang. And so let's just be straightforward. So I want to start with that premise and that understanding. Now, every one of us is a unique person, created by God and influenced by our circumstances. Understanding our differences will allow us to accept, strengthen, and bless each other. So the better you understand your uniqueness, better understand how different you are from your spouse, the more you can strengthen one another, the more you can accept one another, and the more you can bless one another. So your job is to study and observe your spouse in order to understand what they do and why they do it. Accept them for who God created them to be and help them become a better them. So that's what we're going to be looking at this lesson. We're going to teach you what is different about you compared to your spouse. And by the way, this same information, if you're a parent, man, this is helpful for your kids. If you can take the same things we're talking about and use them with your children, you're going to make a difference in their life as well. It will help you to understand them. It will help you to raise them. It will help you to guide them into being who God created them to be. But it will help you in your relationship as well. Now, there's two things you want to look for here. You want to try to understand your spouse, her or his personality, understand them as a male or female, and understand them based upon the circumstances of their life, everything that's happened to them up to this point. Now, you also want to do the same thing for yourself as well. I think this lesson not only helped me to understand my wife, but it also helped me to understand myself and my strengths and my weaknesses. And knowing my strengths, I can play to those strengths. And knowing my weaknesses, I understand how to work on those and how to allow my wife then to strengthen me in those areas as well. And so that's what we want to try to do in this lesson. So as you look at the lesson, the first area we're going to look at is the characters. The characters. In other words, your personality. Now, when we talk about personality, all observers of human nature will tell you that there are different personalities. And most of them will narrow down to basically 4 different types of personalities. Some have 7, some have 8, a few more than that. Very few have less than 4. Most of them will come down with the same 4 basic personalities. The difference is what they call them. Now, I'm not a big word person. How many have ever heard of Tim LaHaye? Tim LaHaye is a Christian psychologist. He's written a number of books. One is called The Spirit-Controlled Temperament. And he uses the terms, I think they were created by one of the old Greek philosophers, but he uses the term phlegmatic, sanguine, choleric, and melancholic. How many have ever heard those terms before? Okay, I've heard them over and over again. I've read about them. I've read their definitions, and I still couldn't tell you which one's which. because they're just too big of words for me. I'm not a big word person, okay? So those don't work for me. And so I like to keep it simple. And there's a man named Gary Smalley. Anybody read a book by Gary Smalley or heard him speak? And John Trent is another one, a partner of his. And they came up with the animals. I'm not sure if it's original to them or not, but they basically came out with the animal personalities. And so they have the lion, the otter, the retriever, and the beaver. Those are the 4 basic personalities. Now, again, most observers of human nature say there are 4 basic personalities. And when you look at the definition of those 4 basic personalities, they're all pretty much the same thing. A little bit of variance here and there, but they come down to the same thing. So whatever you're going to call them, you are one of these 4 personalities. And actually, all of us have some of all 4 characteristics. As I go through these characteristics, everybody in this room has some of all of them. And but most of us are a combination of 2 of them. We are a lion otter, a beaver retriever, a retriever lion. You have the dominant personality and then the secondary personality. And one of the things that's important to realize here is that many of the personalities have the same traits or characteristics, but they're there for different reasons. They have the same trait, but the motivation or the reason is what makes the difference. So 2 people can do the same thing, but the motive will be different. That will tell you the different personalities. So you need to look for you. You need to look for your children, for your spouse, and you need to look for your children as well. And this is good to use with people you work with and others as you begin to understand them also. Now, it's probably going to be pretty obvious to you as we go through this lesson. As we start telling you the characteristics, it's probably going to be a light bulb goes off, a bell rings, or your spouse's elbow hits you in the ribs. And it's going to tell you that's your personality. Most people don't have a difficult time figuring out their personality. They may have a little bit of trouble, which is dominant, which is secondary, but most people can usually figure it out as we go along. Okay? But what I want you to do before you make your final decision, listen to all 4. And then go back and decide what yours is. And the other thing I would do is ask your spouse, before you tell them, ask them, what do you think I am? Both of you come up in your mind with what it is, and then you share with each other what you think each other is. Okay? Don't tell them until they've already decided in their mind what you are. And another check and balance is to ask some other people in the church. I can tell you already what some of you are because it's clearly obvious. And I can tell you what you're not as well. Okay, so let's look at the different personalities. And the first one is the lion personality. We've got the lion right here, you know. And the lion personality, the lion, he's the king of the jungle. Okay, he's the guy that's in charge. The lion doesn't need a den in his house. He roars in every room of his house. He's just the one that's the king. Now, number 1 is the lion is the natural leader. They're the person that when you're in a group of people and you say, well, what are we going to do? Everybody kind of turns and looks at them. That tends to be the lion. Not always, but they tend to be the natural leader. They tend to be the person everybody looks to make the decisions. Number 2 is they take charge, even if they're not the boss. Some of you work with a lion who's not in charge, but he thinks he is. And he tells everybody else what to do. And if you're married to one of them, they're always telling everybody else what to do. If you've got a 2-year-old that's a lion, the 2-year-old tells you what to do. They think that you're living in their house, okay? The lion is the person that's in charge. They take charge. They're decisive. Lions are very decisive with or without the facts. The lion's motto is, don't bother me with the facts. I've already made up my mind. And generally, when you speak to a lion, once they've made a decision, you can tell them everything, and that's not going to change them. They're really hard to get them change their point of view because they've already made that decision, and they're going to stick with it. And so just don't bother arguing me. In fact, when you have a committee, and the lion's on that committee, what happens is they sit there, let everybody kind of argue around for a little while, and then they say, this is what we should do. And at that point, they expect discussion stops. If you try to continue discussion, they give you one of those looks like, I've already told you what to do. So why are we continuing this discussion? If you're married to a lion, that's usually the way it happens as well. Once they decide, no new information is going to change anything because they've already made up their mind. They're very, very decisive, which is good. When you're dating a lion, you never have to decide where you're going to go. They've already decided. They never ask you where they want to go. They're just going to say, we're going to go here. And they're very decisive. Number 4 is they're usually the boss or they think they are. They're usually the boss or they think they are. Now, in a marriage relationship, when the wife is the lion, that makes life a little bit difficult because who does the Bible say is supposed to be the leader? The husband. But the wife thinks she's in charge. And so they think they're the boss. You see, the real power is the lion. The lion relationship, but the wife again is the lion. You ask the husband who's in charge in your home, and he'll say, well, I am. Right, honey? That's the lion. See, they know who the real power behind the throne is. They know who the one that really makes the decision is. They might give lip service. And generally, if you ask the wife if she's the lion, generally ask her, she'll say, well, I let my husband make all the decisions as long as he does what I'm told. You know, she didn't add that last part, but that's how it comes out. Okay, number 5 is lions are determined. They're determined. You give them something to do, and they're going to get it done right or wrong. They will fit the square peg in the round hole. They will make it fit. Whatever needs to be done, they're going to get it done one way or the other. So you just better get out of their way because it's going to happen. They're very determined. Even when it's going to be a mess, even when it's going to it's obvious this isn't where we should be going or what we should be doing, they just keep moving forward. They just keep going no matter what. They're determined. Number 6 is lions speak in Reader's Digest conversation. Now, how many know what a Reader's Digest is? Okay, Reader's Digest, they were famous as a little magazine, and they would condense big novels into magazine-sized stories. They would take the whole novel this thick and condense it down and put it in the magazine. Well, that's the way the lion is. The lion can talk to his mom on the phone for an hour. He hangs up the phone. His wife says, well, what'd your mom say? And he says, well, she said she was fine. Is that all? Oh, yeah. I mean, that's it. The Reader's Digest conversation. How was your day? It was good. I mean, you don't get a whole lot out of them because they just kind of condense everything down. Number 7 is the lion expects obedience. You do what I tell you to do now. No discussion. No talking back. In fact, with the lion generally, even if you have a legitimate question, that is rebellion in their mind. If you just say, well, what do you want me to do? Just do it. They don't want a discussion. It's not a question and answer. It's just get it done. And a lion parent is really rough on the kids because just do it. And sometimes they need that, but other times they need an explanation or they need some guidance or they need some opportunity to talk to you a little bit about it. But the lions are not that way. Just obey me and we'll all be happy. Everybody be happy. You know, if the lion ain't happy, ain't nobody else in the house going to be happy, all right? Number 8 is a lion is an anyholic. Anyholic. Now, what do I mean by that? Whatever they do, they tend to do it in extreme. If a lion is an alcoholic, they go all the way. They can't handle drink because they just go all the way. But they can be a workaholic. They can be a TV-aholic. They can be an internet-aholic. Whatever they do, they tend to do it to extreme. They tend to go overboard with it, and they tend to be addictive. Lions have an addictive behavior. They can very easily get addicted on things, and not always bad things. A lot of lions are sports addicts, or they're shopping addicts, or whatever else it might be. It just, they tend to go to extreme whatever they do. Lions also, number 9, they have a little bit of elephant in them because they're unforgiving. They're unforgiving. And the reason they're unforgiving is because that elephant, they never forget. You cross them, you're on their list for the rest of your life. And they tend not to forgive because they don't forget. You didn't do what I told you to do. I remember that. And so they're not good at forgiving for that reason. Now, we'll see later on, one of the other personalities is unforgiving, but for a different reason. Lions are impatient. They want it, and they want it now. If they're ready to eat, the food better be on the table. If the lion is the husband and he wants sex, he doesn't want it tonight, he wants it now. Whatever he wants it now. He does not want to wait. Not good at waiting. Number 11 is lions are unemotional, which really is kind of a false statement because they are emotional. But the things with lions is if they become emotional, it's like somebody flipped a switch. It's like somebody went from one to the other. Lions very rarely have a tear trickle down their cheek. In fact, they very rarely cry. But if they do cry, they're going to bawl. Lions don't giggle. They laugh out loud. When they get emotional, it's like they flip a switch. Otherwise, they're very unemotional. They just don't, they tell their wife, I love you. It's like, I love you. There's no emotion in it. It's not because they don't love you, it's just because they have a very difficult time expressing emotion. And if they do, and one of the reasons they don't express emotion, because they're afraid of it getting out of control. And then number 12 is lions are optimistic. Now again, one of the other personalities is optimistic, but these lions are optimistic for a different reason. They are optimistic because I can do it. Whatever needs to be done, I can do it. They're optimistic for that reason, okay? All right, so you get the picture on the lion. Now don't raise your hand, but how many of you are thinking right now, I may be a lion? Or how many think of my husband or my wife may be a lion? Or maybe you got a 2-year-old lion in your house. Okay? Second personality is the otter. Okay? Now, the otter personality is right over here. And the otter, if you've ever seen otters at the zoo or out in live, otters look like they're always having fun. They look like the party animal. I mean, they're sliding and swimming and jumping and just having a good time. An otter is a party looking for some place to happen. They just want to have fun. They want to have a good time. The otter is often the life of the party, but you don't have to be the life of the party to be the otter. You just got to like having fun. They're not always the life of the party. If they are the life of the party, they're very likely the otter, okay? Now, it's very different than the lion. The lion goes to the party, and he kind of sits on his throne at the party. And everybody kind of comes and bows down to the lion. He's the center of attention because he's on his throne, and he's in charge. But the otter, he's the life of the party. He's just going to have fun in life. In fact, the otter's probably his favorite saying is lighten up or take it easy. Don't get excited. Those are his favorite sayings. Number 1, the otter is friendly. But next to that word friendly, write the word shallow. The otters have 1,000 friends, about this deep. You can tell otters because when they greet you, they say this, hey buddy, how you doing? You know why they say buddy? Because they can't remember your name. They've got all these friends. They're friends with everybody. But they're not deep friendships. They tend to be shallow friendships. You can tell the lion at the party because he's got to talk to everybody. And you see when he's talking to you, Brother West, can you come up here a second? Let me have you help me out here. So here's the lion. He's coming up. Hey, good to see you, buddy. Glad you're here. How you doing? Everything going good in your life? Yep. Yeah, it's good to talk to you. And then they're off to the next person. You know, if when I said everything going good in your life, he could have said, oh, I have cancer. I said, well, that's great. And I'd walk right on. That's the otter. Thank you. You may be seated. They've got to get to everybody. They've got to keep moving. They don't want to talk to you too long because it might get serious. And they're not serious in life. They really don't want to know how you're doing. They don't care. Not because they're uncaring, but because they go through life not caring. That's just who they are. They're friendly, but it's shallow friendships. Secondly, they're fun-loving. The otter just wants to have fun. Let's just have fun. Lighten up. Take it easy. Let's have a good time. Why do you have to be so serious? Let's just have some fun. Now, they're great to date. Man, you're dating an otter, you're going to have fun. But then when you settle down, you want him to get serious about life, and it's not so fun anymore. Third thing about otters is they're a people person. They want to be around people. Again, their friendships are shallow, but they still don't like to be alone. They just don't like to be alone. An otter will be driving down the road, and he'll drive by a crowd of people. He'll pull over and get out and go see what's going on. He doesn't come to church necessarily be blessed by the message. He comes because there's people at church. And I got to be around people. Now imagine if you got the otter and you got somebody who's not wanting to get out and go places, the problems that are there. And then number 4 is their otters are outgoing. Otters generally will talk to most anybody. They're willing to go out and do things. They're just outgoing. Number 5 is they're enthusiastic. Everything is big. Everything is exciting. Everything is fun. And they're enthusiastic about everything. Doesn't matter what it is. Hey, that sounds great. That sounds like fun. Let's do this. And they're enthusiastic about everything. And number 6, they're talkative. Otters can talk a mile a minute and say nothing. They talk, but they don't say anything. There's no depth to their conversation. And if it gets too deep, they'll move on to the next person. And when it's silent, the otters will speak up. You want to know the otters in a group? Just let everything quiet down, and the otter will go about 30 seconds, maybe 60 at the most, and then he's got to say something. And usually what he says is stupid. Because he's just got to talk. And then the otter is procrastinator. I had a plaque when I was a kid. And on the plaque it says, "Why procrastinate when I can put it off till tomorrow?" And that became my life's motto. And they're procrastinators. Everything is later. Everything is tomorrow. If you're married to an otter, you say, "Honey, can you take out the trash? I'll do it in just a minute." Now, in your mind, a minute is 60 seconds from now. In his mind, a minute means sometime in the future, probably never going to happen. They procrastinate on everything. Everything is later. And usually by the time they get around to it, it's a disaster. They take out the garbage when the garbage truck is already driving to the next house. They pay the bill 30 days after the bill is due. You know, they're always later. They're procrastinators. Number 8 is otters are weak-willed. And the reason they're weak-willed, this is important to motivation, because another character is weak-willed, is they want to be happy. If you got a daughter and she's dating an otter, you better get the gun out. Because he's the one that's going to be saying, "Let's have sex," because he wants to be happy. He's weak-willed. Number 9 is otters are disorganized. You want to know the otters? Look at their desk. Look at their closet. Look at their drawers. Look at all those places and see what it looks like. When there's no organization, everything's kind of thrown in there. The clothes are all hung up haphazardly and they're not buttoned and all the rest of it. You know you got an otter because they are disorganized. Now, they try, but even at their best, it's still a disaster. Number 10, otters are exaggerators. Now, do not put anywhere in that area the word liar. Because if you're married to an otter, you think they're a liar. And they're not. They are exaggerators. Now, what the difference is, a liar purposely tells an untruth. An otter very rarely does that, but he exaggerates. So an otter will go out and catch a fish, and the fish will be this big. By the time he gets home, describing it to his wife, the fish is this big. By the time he gets to work on Monday, the fish is this big, and by the end of the week, the fish is this big. Now, he isn't lying. That is how he now remembers it. He has a bad memory. I am part liar. My wife is not. For the first years of our marriage, she thought I was a liar. In fact, I'd preach in church, and after church, a lot of people say, great message, pastor, and everything, but the most important critic to me is my wife. And so we'd get in the car, and after we were driving away from the church, I'd turn to her and say, if she hadn't already said so, I'd wait a little bit to see if she would say something. That's always the best, ladies, if you'll say something before you're asked, men too. But if she didn't say anything, I'd say, well, how was the message? And if she said, fine. Now, fellas, when your wife says, fine, things ain't fine. Okay? But she'd say, fine. And you could tell by the tone, you could tell by the word, you could tell by her body language that it was not fine. And my wife is what we'll look at later, the retriever personality. She just wasn't going to criticize me, and because I'm part lion as well, and I don't take criticism well, and I would roar at her if she did. She knew that and all the rest of it. So she would just say, fine. And I say, well, what was wrong with it? Nothing. And again, fellas, when your wife says nothing, there's something, okay? Learn this quick, okay? So she's over there, but she won't tell me what's wrong. I didn't find out till years later. You know what the problem was? I would give an illustration in the message. And in that illustration, I would say, this many years ago, there was this many people, and they did this, and I would get the details wrong. Now, in my mind, all the details were absolutely right. But she is the perfectionist, and her numbers were probably more right than my numbers, to be honest with you. And she'd sit there, and when I would say that and give the wrong numbers, in her mind, she would think, you liar. You're the man of God preaching his word, and you're lying to these people. What did I do in marrying a liar like you? Now, she never told me that, but that's what she was thinking. Now, I don't remember one time ever telling what I knew was a lie. A lot of times I would say, Caleb did this, and it was Benjamin. Or I would say, Benjamin did this, and it was our dog Bandit that did it. I mean, that's how bad I am. There's a lot of times I would say 5 years ago, and it was 15 years ago. Or I'd say 15 years ago, and it was 2 months ago. I would say there was this many people, like 100 people, and there would only be 20 people. I mean, but none of those were outright chosen lies. They were the truth as I remembered it. And boy, did that create some problems. Because in her mind, I was not an exaggerator. I was a liar. Oh, that was tough. And we'll talk about how to deal with that. And then number 11 is otters are undisciplined. Otters do not do well with diets. Otters do not do well with exercise programs. Otters do not do well with daily devotions for their Bible study or prayer. They're undisciplined. And then number 12 is otters are optimistic. Do you remember somebody else that's optimistic? Who is that? The lion. Lion's optimistic because I could do it. You know why the otter's optimistic? It'll work out somehow. It's not because I'm going to make it work. It just, que sera, sera, whatever happens, whatever it will be. It'll work out somehow, and everything kind of always works out for the otter, so don't worry about it. And they're optimistic in that way. But for a very different reason. Okay, number 3 is the golden retriever. Golden retriever is the puppy dog personality, okay? We got over here the little puppy dog, and everybody loves a little puppy dog. Oh, so cute, so cuddly and everything like that. The golden retriever personality is the one that is sensitive to the max. Again, I like dogs, I don't like cats. Because cats could care less about your feelings. It's all about them. Now, a dog, he always knows how you feel. You come in happy, your dog's wagging his tail, his tongue taking out, he's jumping up and down, he's excited. You come in sad, he puts his little chin on your lap and just gives you little puppy dog eyes. You come in mad, he's got his tail between his legs, he's kind of sitting off the corner waiting to see how things are going to go. They're sensitive. And the retriever personality is sensitive to everybody around them. And not only are they sensitive in that way, but they're almost like a chameleon. It's like as they walk through a crowd, they keep changing emotional colors. They walk by somebody that's feeling good, they're feeling good. And they walk by somebody's down, they're down. They get around somebody's down, they become down with them. And they always know, oh, so-and-so, something's wrong. Nothing wrong with them. Yeah, I can tell. They're just sensitive. And they're sensitive with you. What's the matter? You okay? You mad at me? That's a retriever. If they're saying that all the time, they're retrievers. Because they're always worried about how you're feeling. They're sensitive to the max. They're very nurturing. They're great listeners. See, the otter goes to the party, and he never talks to anybody for more than 2 or 3 minutes. The retriever goes to the party, and they will listen to you talk for an hour. And somebody calls me on the phone, 5 minutes later, I'm ready to hang up on them. That's not good for a pastor, by the way. But that's the way I am, because of my personality. The retriever personality, you call on the phone, they will stay on the phone with you forever. They will listen to all your problems. You start telling me about your problems, I don't want to hear them. But the retriever, they're going to listen to your problems, and they're nurturing. They're not only going to listen, but they make you feel better. In fact, when you're done talking to retriever, you walk away feeling better, and they walk away. It's like they catch your disease. All your spots are gone, and they're on the retriever now. They take some of your burden with them. They're nurturing. Number 3, they're fewer, deeper friends. Retrievers have friends, and they have deep friendships. I don't even remember the names of the people I went to high school with. My wife knows everybody in her class, and she still knows what's going on in their lives. I haven't talked to anybody in high school for I don't know how long, because he's got deeper friendships. If you're a retriever, you've got friends that are friends for life. You may not see them for years. You're always wanting a best friend. If you don't have a best friend, you feel lost. And the other thing about retrievers is they can be your best friend. You don't even know that. I remember in college, somebody told somebody else, they said, well, Wayne's my best friend. And when they told me that, I go, I am? Wow, I didn't know that. They don't need you to give anything back to them. They're givers, not takers. They're diplomatic. They want peace at all cost. And so they won't argue with you. They won't talk back. They won't tell you the truth. If you're married to a retriever, what's wrong? They won't tell you. They just won't argue. First 5 years of our marriage, I won every argument, and I was losing the war. Because she was too diplomatic to tell me, you're a liar. The peace at all costs. Whatever I have to do to make peace, I'll do that. They're passive. Boy, they take a lot of abuse. You can abuse a retriever emotionally, even physically, and they will take it, and they will take it, and they will take it. But let me warn you, fellas, if you are married to a retriever and you're going to win every argument, I would hide the knives. You ever read an article in the paper or watched a news story and some lady stabbed her husband 40 times and all the neighbors are saying, I can't believe it. She was so quiet and so meek, I can't believe she was a retriever. And she took it, and she took it, and she took it, and she took it, and there came a point where she couldn't take it anymore, and that's when she exploded, and she grabbed that knife, and she went, ah! And all those years are coming out. Or they get to a point. Retriever, they take it, and they take it, and they take it, and they keep telling their husband, we got to work out our problems, we got to work out our problems. And then there comes a day where they say, you know what, I'm done. And they walk out the door, and the husband's saying, I'll work with you. I'll go to counseling. She said, too late. That's a retriever. There's a limit. But boy, they can take it. And you may win the argument, but you are losing the war as they're closing up on you. They're indecisive. Never, ever ask a retriever, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? You get two retrievers that date each other, they will never go anywhere. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't want. They'll go on forever. Now, again, that's great. If you're a lion and you're dating a retriever, it's great when she thinks you know everything and let you make all the decisions. But at some point after you've been married, you're looking at the girl saying, listen, make a decision. I don't have to decide everything. They're indecisive. They're dependable. You tell someone, I want to meet you somewhere at 7 o'clock. Now, if they're a lion, they don't meet you. You come to them. Lions don't meet people, okay? If you're an otter, you say, I want to meet you over here at this place at 7 o'clock. They might show up by 8 o'clock, if you're lucky. If they're a retriever, they will be there at 6:45 and they will stay there until 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the rain waiting for you. And if they're the next one, the beaver, they'll be there right at 7 o'clock on time. They are just dependable. They are also pessimistic. Reason they're pessimistic, nothing ever works for me. They're like Eeyore. Oh, nothing ever works for me. They're pessimistic. It won't work, never does. They're sympathetic. They sympathize with you. Man, they're great in that way. Agreeable. We had a dog named Bandit. Bandit was one of these wonder dogs. Whenever you look at him, you say, wonder what that thing is. He was a mix of a bunch of different breeds, terrier and something else. We never knew what. And just kind of look at him. And he was just kind of a strange dog. And I'd look at him and just shake my head and wonder, what's wrong with that dog? And I'd look at Bandit. I said, Bandit, you're a stupid dog. And he'd go, yeah. I go, you're a dumb dog. Yeah. You're an ugly dog. Yeah. That's the way a retriever is. You can call them names. You can tell them they're dumb, they're ugly, there's something wrong with them, and they will agree with you. They're just agreeable. Doesn't mean they necessarily think it's true, but they're agreeable. They won't argue with you. They're fearful. They are afraid of everything. And there's not anything to be afraid of, they're afraid of that. Very fearful in life. They're afraid of a tsunami. They're afraid of a hurricane. They're afraid of financial disaster. Anything that's predicted on the internet, they're going to believe it. They're fearful. Any kind of disease comes up, somebody gets a cancer, I'm going to get cancer. Somebody gets yellow fever, I'm going to get yellow fever. Whatever it is, they're fearful. And they're weak-willed. Now, different reason than the otter. Otter's weak-willed because they want to be happy. Guess why the retriever's weak-willed? Because they want to make you happy. Can you see a danger if an otter and a retriever are dating? Oh, yeah. Weak-willed. The last one is the beaver. We're going to kind of do a little longer here, but stay with me. I want to get this done. The beaver now. The beaver one is this. When you want something done, leave it to beaver. Okay? That's the beaver personality. Now, what do we mean by that? All right, first of all, the beaver personality is the personality that is very orderly. Everything has to be in order. So the beaver's personality, they fold their socks when they put them in the drawer. And they're color-coded in the drawer. In fact, here's the way you can tell the difference between the personalities. See what they do with their dirty socks. The lion will drop them where they are and expect the slaves to pick them up for him. The otter will shoot baskets with his dirty socks, and when he misses, they stay where they fall. The retriever, guess what they're going to do? Pick up the socks for the lion and the otter. You know what the beaver's going to do? They're going to fold their socks before they put them in the laundry. They're orderly. Analytical. They analyze everything to death. They're going to analyze everything. Any decision you make, they're going to have a 10-page paper on that decision, all the pros and cons. They're just going to go through analyzing everything. They analyze you, they analyze your decisions, they analyze the kids. They're constantly analyzing, which is good. These are not all bad characteristics. They can be good and bad. They're persistent. They're going to finish the job. You work with a beaver, you give them a job to do, they're going to plod at it and continue until they're done. They're persistent. They're perfectionists. Here's another way you can tell the difference. Tell the personalities to build a play set. You're going to build a little swing set, with a slide and all that for the kids. Here's what the lion's going to do. He's going to take that box, he's going to rip it open, and he's going to drop everything on the ground, and he's going to look at the instruction book and toss it aside, and he's going to grab all the pieces and start putting them together. And he's going to get it together, but it's not going to be by the plans. He's probably going to have some extra pieces, and some of them aren't going to look like they're supposed to go together, but it's going to work. The otter is going to rip open the box, dump out the pieces, lose at least 2 of them in the process of it. He's going to look at all the pictures in the instruction book, put it aside, start to put it together. 3 weeks later, it's still halfway assembled in the backyard. If they're the retriever, they're going to open the box carefully, lay out all the parts, read the instructions, and think, I don't know if I can do this. And they're going to never get to doing it because they're afraid of making a mistake. And then if it's the beaver, they're going to open the box, they're going to lay out all the parts, they're going to do that checklist that's in the instruction manual. They're going to find 2 parts that are missing and order those from the factory. They're also going to find 3 grammatical errors and 2 other mistakes in the instruction book. They're going to call the company up and tell them about it, and then they're going to put it all together exactly as it was designed to go together. Do you see yourself there somewhere? That's the difference. They are also martyrs. They're self-sacrificing. They're the ones that eat the heel of the bread because we can't throw it away and nobody else can eat it, so I'll eat it. They're the ones that when you take some other refrigerator, it's kind of borderline good or bad, but they can't throw it away, so I'll eat it. I'll do it. And then make sure everybody knows that I'll do it. There are details. Oh man, put an underline under that word details. They are bogged down by details. Now, otters, red tape, details, they don't matter. But the beaver, everything has got to be right. That's why beavers are terrible telling jokes. Because they tell a joke and they say there was this salesman, I think he sold vacuum cleaners. No, it was books he was selling door to door. And he went out and it was, he went to this house and they get bogged down in details. By the time they're done with the joke, you're saying, what was the plot here? You know? They get lost in the details. They can't tell jokes. But details, man, everything's detailed and you got to do it. And then easily offended. Why are they easily offended? Because they see everything you do wrong. They see it all, and they're offended by it. Pessimistic, different than the retriever, because they're pessimistic because it won't work, and I can tell you why it won't work. They're critical to the point, put the word next to it, nag, because they find fault in everything. I give my wife, I write a letter or write the devotions for the couples. I give it to her to check. And it comes back with red marks all over it. I've told her, honey, before you put any red marks on there, would you just tell me that was a good devotion? And then mark it up. But she can't do that. And she's got to show you every little thing that's wrong in there. Because they're just see it. They can't not see it. They look at it and it just, boom, right pops out of them. My wife will say, can't you see that? And I say, what? I don't see that where she does. Moody. They're very moody because they see all the problems in life. They're diligent. Man, just stay with the job. Get it done. Do it right. And number 12, if you can't do it right, don't do it. Now imagine you put a beaver with an otter. Imagine the conflict that's there. So we need to understand there's a big difference here. So you need to write in there later on what the husband is and what the wife is. I'm a otter lion. My wife is a beaver retriever. All kinds of conflict. We'll talk about that next week. Don't want you to stop being who you are. I love her because she's a beaver retriever, but I want to kill her because she's a beaver retriever. And she wants to do the same with me. So we've got to learn how to communicate. Imagine you put a lion and a puppy dog in the same cage. Imagine that little puppy dog looks at the lion and goes, arf! What's the lion's reaction going to be? It's either going to laugh or bite its head off. So you got to understand these personalities because that's where a lot of your conflict is coming from. And we're going to talk about that a little further next week. And then we're going to talk about our differences as male and female. And we're going to talk about your brain. Your brain is different. We're going to talk about that.